everybody has an accent, and the reason why some accents are considered worse or better is because of society's bias, and frankly, you choosing not trying to understand them because they don't sound how you want them to sound. The problem isn't the person with the accent, the problem is you. The person who is listening and has already passed judgment that the person that they are listening to sounds uneducated, and therefore you don't have the time or day to try and understand what they're communicating to you because you're fixated on what they sound like instead of what they're trying to communicate to you. But one interesting thing for me is that the accent is never too thick for you to imitate and make a mockery of to amuse yourself when it suits you. As an African migrant that lives in New York City, on a daily, I encounter a lot of accents. And as someone who speaks with one and listens to one, to be honest, it can be quite exhausting. But I don't stand on that to dismiss people. I've taken that opportunity to actually appreciate people and the way they talk. And in doing so, my life has been open to different types of connection and opportunities. So what is this conundrum called an accent? Well, essentially an accent is how someone pronounces their words and how they phrase their sentences and words in speech. And there could be multiple of reasons why someone has an accent. Someone can have an accent because of where they were born and where they grew up. Someone can have an accent because of their first language, which is their native language. And someone can have an accent because of who they interact with and in their society. Accents can be regional in the sense that someone who is from New York would definitely sound different from someone who is from Texas. And also, someone whose first language isn't English would definitely sound different when they're speaking English. And an accent can be influenced by the two. Let's take New York City for an example. New York City has 5 boroughs: the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. Someone who is from the Bronx might sound or will sound slightly different from someone who is from Brooklyn. Someone who is from Queens would sound slightly different from someone who is from Manhattan or Staten Island. But it's never a problem for New Yorkers of different boroughs when this conundrum of an accent happens or when they catch someone's accent. But the problem always arises when the accent is from an African, someone who's from Vietnam, or someone who's from Asia, or someone who isn't from an European country. I mean, if you're able to binge watch all the seasons of Peaky Blinders and understand the Birmingham accent, why is it so difficult for you to understand someone who speaks with an African accent or a Vietnamese accent or a Jamaican accent? That is a question you should be asking yourself. Why? You know why. Okay, I'm getting a little bit dramatic. Let's get to the point of this video. The answer is simple. I'm giving you 2 answers, straight up. 1, society's bias, and 2, your inability or your lack of effort to train your ears and your mind to understand the pattern of speech of someone who is from the countries that I've mentioned. Because for some reason, some accents are superior than the other. Societal bias. And then because you already have this societal bias, you have tuned your ears and your mind off from trying to understand what someone is saying by paying attention to like what they're trying to communicate to you and know what they sound like. I've always had an accent my entire life. When I moved from Nigeria to Ghana, I had an accent. My English didn't sound like how the Ghanaian English would sound like when you speak it or when you hear it. When I moved to New York from Ghana, everybody knew I wasn't from here because I didn't sound like a New Yorker in terms of how I spoke my English. And I would often hear, "Oh, you speak well." Well, I didn't used to get offended by it, but some people would get offended by it, but a lot of things offend me, but that isn't one of them. And the reason why I speak so well is because when the Brits colonized Ghana and they came into the country and then we welcomed them, on their way going back, they left us their version of English. So that's why I sound like that, and that's why I speak English. For someone like me who speaks more than one language, I speak Hausa, Yoruba, Twi, English included 4, and many like me who also speak more than one language or 2 language with English included, it is nearly impossible for us to speak without an accent because our English would be affected by the phonetics of all the other languages that we speak. So one day I was very curious at work. I spend most of my time at work and I interact a lot with my boss. And we've never had a situation where I felt like she was making a mockery of my accent or she was finding it hard to understand what I was saying. But I was so curious because I wanted to hear how I sound to her. I wanted to hear what she hears in her ear's mind when she's listening to me. So I asked her to imitate how I speak. And when I asked her, what I was looking or hoping to hear was the exaggerated Hollywood accent that is being portrayed. Like, we all don't sound the same. Africa has 54 countries and we all don't sound the same when we speak English. It's so silly when I hear like those accents in movies. I'm like, oh my God, this is so silly and dumb. So she did imitate the way I speak, and it wasn't offensive at all because what I was hearing wasn't what I hear in Hollywood movies. She was speaking with my mannerism and some of like my verbal cues and my non-verbal cues when I speak. For example, when something is so outrageous to me or is funny or is mind-boggling to me, I say, hey! I say a lot of hey a lot at work, and for some reason it makes them laugh. But then when they're laughing, I know they're not laughing in a condescending way because I know I am being dramatic, so they are laughing. So when she imitated the way I was speaking, it was mostly my mannerism and not she trying so hard to have my accent when she's speaking, which I appreciated a lot. So because my boss did this thing where she chose to understand me beyond what I sound like and actually actively listening to what I'm trying to communicate to her, she has been able to kill 4 birds with 1 stone. The right idiomatic expression is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The first bird that she killed was that by actively listening to me, she was able to reduce bias and stereotypes when it comes to accent. Because she understood that I spoke more than 1 language, she understood that it was going to be a linguistic blend. So I might not sound the way that she's used to hearing, but just because I don't sound the way that she's used to hearing doesn't mean I am not making sense to her. And then because she understood that, she was also able to remove or dismiss this stupid connection that people make, that like you speaking English or being able to speak English the way they want you to speak it is linked to your intelligence, which is not true. The second bird that she killed was that we were able to improve our communication and connection in the sense that she understood that I spoke more than 1 language. So she has to be able to understand me beyond my words and then beyond my sound. And now she's paying attention to my mannerism. And the moment I realized she was paying attention to my mannerism, I felt valued by her. And because I felt valued by her because she was paying attention to my mannerism, it made working with her easier, and it made the environment that I was working in a very healthy one that has promoted my growth, not just in my communication skills, but my other skills as someone who works in that company. The third bird that she killed with 1 stone, and the stone is choosing to understand me beyond my accent, was that she became cultural aware. It increased her cultural awareness of me in terms of how I speak and behave. Ghanaians say a lot of please. Ghanaians will say, please, good morning, please, thank you. I would say, please, thank you. I know that was something that I used to say. And then she didn't understand why I would say, please, thank you. And I explained to her that Ghanaians say a lot of please, thank you, not because we are timid people, but then because it's a sign of respect and humility. And she was like, oh, then no problem. and we move on. And now she has become aware of certain aspects of my culture, the culture that I came from. The fourth bird that she killed with the stone of actively listening to me and not what I sound like, not my accent, but what I'm trying to communicate, is that it strengthened our relationship and created a room, a space of empathy in the environment that we work. Because I realized that she was being aware and listening to me and being kind to me and in training her ears and her mind to understand what I'm saying, it made me feel comfortable around her. It made me feel like I could be myself and I didn't have to change my accent because she was not listening to my accent and then she was listening to me, which strengthened our relationship and then created an atmosphere of empathy in the space that we work. I'm not going to lie, when I first moved here, I used to neutralize my accent a lot because I realized whenever I neutralized my accent, I got better treatment. But it is exhausting, really. It is exhausting, and it came to a point that I realized that I wasn't the problem. The person who was listening to me that is making me neutralize my accent is the problem. For an immigrant, our accent isn't just how we sound. It is tied to our identity, our culture, our history, and it is shaped by colonialism, it is shaped by our native language, it is shaped by geography, and it is shaped by education. That is why accent bias is a real problem, because it makes people feel ashamed of who they are, and no one should have to feel ashamed for who they are, especially you, who is an immigrant and then you come from a rich culture which you're supposed to be proud of and carry along with you everywhere that you go. And that is why you who is listening, if you want to expand your horizon and be more kind and be a better person, actively listen to someone beyond what they sound like and listen to what they're trying to communicate to you. It will enrich in your life and broaden your mind and broaden your experiences. Don't you want that? You do. I know you do. I've come to accept that I don't have to change my accent and you don't have to change yours too. It is who you are. It is a part of who you are. And the moment you are fixated on changing your accent, you're slowly erasing parts of who you are that makes you authentic. Part of who you are that you can share. Part of who you are that someone is interested in getting to know. At the end of the day, choosing to understand is a choice, and choosing to listen beyond an accent is a step towards respect, inclusivity, and real communication. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for spending time with me today, and I will see you in the next video.